When I was a child each week, on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest as he would read the holy word. He would consecrate the holy bread. Everybody would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two and Jesus made the water wine. I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still, but now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Well, wine into water is not so small, but even magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second rate hand-me-down, but now I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. We'll read a questioning child's face and say it's not a testament. Well, that'd be really hard to say. See another new morning come and say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head, and I remember when church let out and how things have changed since then, 'cause everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second rate hand-me-down, but now I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Fire has gone wholly dark. It has burned its final spark. I love the music of the wood. Well, I would live here if I could. The earth would be my bed, the moss beneath my head. Spend my days on holy ground if I were not so wholly bound. water has gone fully still. I walk its edge along a hill. The wind has blown its final breeze. The water lets in night's reprieve. What silence must it take to soothe so deep an ache? I'd let the water take me down if I were not afraid to drown. When I wake up, will you be gone? Which side of the mountain will I find you on? If I promise not to make a sound, might I feel the resonance from holy ground? Ooh, ooh. Feel free to sing that with me. Sky is wholly opened wide. The last lonely cloud has moved aside. Immense and fully filled with stars, Venus, Mercury, and Mars. The miles from there to here, what soul could pioneer? I would fly to worlds unknown if I believed they held my home. When I wake up, will you be gone? Which side of the mountain will I find you on? If I promise not to make a sound, might I feel the resonance from holy ground? Here we go. Dark woods down where the highway ends, way past the grove of a rhododendron. The twin wildcats are on the move. As she walks barefoot in between the blackest hair you've ever seen, one hand resting on her womb. And where she steps, the wildflowers bloom. No one sees her, no one knows from where she comes or where she goes when she walks the wooded path at night. From the mountain to the Everglades, she guides the nocturnal parade of owl, wolf, toad, and crocodile. And Sibylle will walk another mile. Your berries from the stem, dig them deep into the earth and cover them. She's the second coming of the Magna Mater, gonna guide you home come hell or high water. Yeah, yeah. slow hot middle of a heavy summer, she made a bed and took a lover. Half moon shimmer on their skin. The woods unleashed a wildfire. The sirens raised a spectral choir. The whole of boundless nature joining in. And Sibylle is ready to begin. Pluck your berries from the stem, dig down deep into the earth and cover them. She's the second coming of the Magna Mater, gonna guide you home from hell or high water. Oh, she's the second coming of the Magna Mater, gonna guide you home from hell or high water. There's a ridge on the edge of a waterfall where the bittersweet vine stretches tall. One of many places she has gone. Dogwood, milkweed, sugar cane, and open sky or heavy rain. She walks the wild lands from dusk to dawn. And Sibylle knows how to carry on. Pluck your berries from the stem, dig down deep into the earth and cover them. She's the second coming of the Magna Mater, gonna guide you home from hell or high water. Oh, she's the second coming of the Magna Mater, gonna make you whole from hell or high water. She's the second coming of the Magna Mater, gonna save your soul from hell or high water. She's the incarnation of the Magna Mater, gonna raise the dead from hell or high water. Thank you so much.
Look for it on November 7th.
A reading from the Gospel of Luke. Hear what God's Spirit is saying to you. He also told this parable to some of those he trusted that trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus, God, I thank you I am not like those other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing off to the side, would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but he was beating his chest and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified more than the other, for all who exalt themselves are humbled, and all who humble themselves are exalted. Here ends the reading of the words that give us insight to God. May God grant us the wisdom and courage for interpretation.
The summer before 8th grade, my church went on a work trip to Washington, D.C. And I use work trip really loosely because we weren't really doing a whole lot of work. What we were mostly doing was getting into trouble. This was a group of mostly teenage boys who were from rural Missouri, and we had not spent much time in big cities. And so we were not the best behaved. And so we went to a go-kart racing facility. Like I said, it was a work trip. We went to a go-kart racing facility, and because of our crazy driving, we got kicked out of that go-kart facility. Then we went to the National Archives, and we got too close to some of the artifacts, and we set off the alarms at the National Archives, and we had to leave there. We went to our senator's office, and our minister decided to open up his cabinets and look through his books. We got side-eyed about that. Then we went to the White House. You know, when there was an East Wing, before it was Mar-a-Lago North. And when we went there, I was astounded by everything that had happened at this White House. Impressed to be there. And towards the end of the tour, some of my friends in the youth group decided that they would put their feet up on stuff, and we got kicked out of the White House. So I can safely say now that I have been kicked out of the White House, and it wasn't even for political reasons. I just got kicked out of the White House because of our behavior. It was an interesting trip, a work trip, but we did do some work on that trip. We went and we volunteered at a soup kitchen. And this was my first time ever doing anything like this. And I was put in the line where after preparing food, we were serving food. And after everyone had been served, most of the youth went and sat at a table by themselves. But for whatever reason, I went down and I sat down next to someone who I just served. And this person was someone who had a PhD, who had done everything kind of right in his life. He had done things like the right way. And just because of his luck, had wound up on the street. And it shattered a lot of my notions about what homelessness was, what it meant, and what my reaction ought to be. And I wouldn't have said this then, because I think God often speaks in kind of quiet ways, and if you're not paying attention, you might miss them. But looking back on this is the way I see it, that I think my call to ministry happened while I was sitting at that table, right there. Because I recognized that what I wanted to do was to try and make the world a better place. And for me, being from rural Missouri, the place where I saw the most good in my community happening was in the church. A church filled with this ragtag group of misfits, people who honestly couldn't agree on a lot of things, but could agree that they wanted to try and follow Jesus. That for me was powerful, because even though people in that church sometimes drove me crazy, they did care about me, and they did care about making the world better. And so it was around that time that I decided that I thought I wanted to go into ministry. And it was also around the time that the Catholic Church abuse scandal was coming out. It was also around the time that megachurch prosperity gospel preachers were making the news very often. And so it was also around the time, I think, that the public was becoming keenly aware that the church has an authenticity problem. That the church is all too happy to say one thing on Sunday morning and then not live it out the rest of the week. People will stand in pulpits and they will say that you need to love your neighbor, even love your enemy, and then support legislation that dehumanizes people. The church has an authenticity problem. And yet, I felt deeply committed to serving in a community where I had experienced God's presence, a community that had helped me know that what I wanted to do was make a difference in the world. I'm preparing to give an address to the Jewish-Christian dialogue, the national dialogue between the National Council of Churches and the National Council of Synagogues. My task is to talk about the future of progressive religion. And in preparation for that, I met with someone from the Pew Research Center. This is the organization that prepares the Pew Religious Landscape Study that says what is happening to congregations, what the trends are. And of course, the trends are that churches are declining extremely rapidly. And honestly, particularly the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, one of the denominations we are affiliated with. It has been the fastest declining denomination for the past 25 years. And between 2019 and 2022, it lost almost a quarter of its members. The average total participating membership of a Disciples Church is 60 people. The average worship attendance is 44 people. Mainline denominations have been declining very rapidly, but it is not just mainline denominations. It is everybody. Catholics are declining. Evangelicals are declining. Church attendance across the board is declining. And there are all kinds of theories about why that is. Some, I think, are better than others, and honestly, it's a combination of things. But the biggest issue is that the church, by and large, those who have the loudest voice of Christianity, the church does not practice what it preaches. Institutional religion does not practice what it preaches. And I'm not talking about this congregation. I am talking about the perceived stance of institutional religion that talks a great deal about welcoming everybody and then can't do it, then won't do it. Who talks a great deal about loving your neighbor and then goes out and props up the religious right that strips away people's rights. You see, it is all good for the church to talk about something, but it does no good if it isn't lived in the world. Right beliefs don't get you anywhere. It is only through living the right way that you actually follow Jesus. And this is what today's scripture lesson is about. Jesus tells a parable, and in the parable, there are two people who go to the temple. One is a Pharisee. And Pharisees were this sect in first century Judaism that were really concerned with doing everything just the right way, having the right beliefs about everything, and then following that. And so they were very concerned with the letter of the law, but not just themselves following their religion in the right way. They were also concerned that everyone else follow the religion in that particular way too. They wanted to legislate that for everybody. That their interpretation needed to be the interpretation that everyone followed. Can you draw parallels to that? And so, yeah, they were righteous. But there's a difference between being righteous and self-righteous, you know? On the other hand, there was someone else in the temple that day, a tax collector. And as you know, tax collectors were very unpopular. The gospel tells us that over and over again. You know why they were so unpopular? Yeah, because they were taking people's money. But there was more to it than that. They were Judeans who had been hired by the local government, whose leaders were colluding with the Roman Empire. They were propping up the Roman Empire in their country. And so tax collectors would come and they would take the required Roman taxes. They would take the temple tax and all that. Then they would take a little off the top for themselves, so they were seen as dishonest because they were cheating people, but it went deeper than that. The money that they were collecting went to the Roman Empire, which the Romans then used to pay their army to occupy Judea. So tax collectors were seen as traitors because they were taking money from their people to pay the principalities and the powers to oppress their people. So you see, they weren't real popular. And you can understand why, with that, Jesus hanging out with tax collectors all the time wasn't a good look, you know? People were like, why are you hanging out with these tax collectors? And can you understand why? But Jesus uses that class of folks to say, look, a tax collector, someone who has had a real change of heart, who is sitting in the temple and saying that I want to turn my life around and change, that person is being more authentic than the Pharisee who on paper is doing all the right things and yet has no real investment in the people around him. In fact, is actively participating in their oppression in a different way. No, the Pharisee isn't collecting taxes to send off to the Romans, but the Pharisee is instituting laws that oppress people in similar ways. And so it is through the change of heart in the tax collector that Jesus says, be like this. Be someone who is not about the oppression of other people. Not the oppression of other people through taxes that go to Rome, and not the oppression of other people through religious legalism that oppresses people as well. You see, Jesus' message was all kinds of radical, because Jesus' message told us over and over again that we're really only following him when we're not people of oppression, but we are people of liberation. The way that we are actually following Jesus is when we are willing to get rid of the self-righteousness, of the obsession with believing the exact right things and ensuring that everyone else is doing the exact right things because of the exact right beliefs, and instead are about being a people who love our neighbors, love our enemies, and seek liberation. You know, Phyllis Tickle is a historian. She was a historian who talked about the future of the church. She said every 500 years or so, the church goes through kind of a great rummage sale and gets rid of things that aren't working anymore and adopts new things that are working. And she said that right now we're at that 500-year mark. The church is transitioning, and it is. And I don't think we know exactly what the church is going to look like. I think we have some ideas about what it might look like. I think we see it thriving in digital spaces. I think we still feel a longing for physical community. But here's the thing. I don't really care if the church looks like it has in the past. I am someone who has found deep meaning in organized religion, who finds deep meaning in being in this community of faith with you all every week, a community that strives to be an authentic witness. I am grateful for all of you. And what I really care about, I think what Christianity, the future of Christianity is really about, isn't about coming and observing the exact right rituals in a sanctuary space, saying that you believe the exact right things. You see, that's being like a Pharisee. I think what the future of religion looks like is religion that is measured not by doing the exact right things because of the exact right beliefs, but instead authentically following Jesus, which means being out in the world and working for the liberation of all those who are oppressed. And you know, if religion looks like that in the future, if church would just actually do that, church wouldn't have to worry about decline. Because if church goes out and acts like that, acts authentically, well, whew, that solves the authenticity problem of the church, doesn't it? I find hope in you, University Christian Church. I find hope in all those I hear from online each week who say, yes, we want to authentically follow Jesus. We want to get rid of all of the dogma and instead just embrace the love of Christ. May it be so, and thanks be to God. Amen.